Hey, welcome to the Automation Guild show where we help you succeed with creating automation awesomeness. And today I'm going to be going over how being technically aware saved me $1,200. Now, the example I give is not necessarily a normal automation scenario, but the skills I've used in my testing automation career are the same ones I applied to this problem. And I think there's some key takeaways we can get from this case study I'm going to share with you on how I saved $1,200 from being technically aware. So we'll be starting in a few minutes. Just going to make sure everything's up and running, and then we'll get started. So if you're in the chat, just leave a chat. Let me know you can hear me and see me. So I'll be right back. And just check in to make sure everything's cool. And now we are live. All right, so we're live. I see Greg Pascal. Hey, Greg, good to see you. So, like I said, welcome to the Automation Guild, where we help you create automation awesomeness. We all come together to help each other out. So, if you have a tip, tool, or technique you'd like to share with the guild, head on over to automationguild.com/show. And on the right-hand side, click on record, leave a message, and I'll play it back in an upcoming Automation Guild show. So, before we get into my quick case study and how being technically aware saved me $1,200 and how it applies to automation and automation engineers, I wanted to go over the very first message I actually got from a guild member on their comments from episode 1 and what they thought about AI and automation. And so this is from Vicky, and it's really cool. Like I said, she's the very first guild member to leave a comment. So let's hear what Vicky has to say about AI automation.
Hi Joe, this is Vicky. So I'm very interested in AI for automation testing. I definitely agree that what Huggins talk about and what you think that AI can definitely replace a lot of dumb automation testing code. However, I do have a concern about if you're gonna give tons of data and train the AI to be smartest top hackers, how are you going to guarantee that those kind of AI agent machines cannot really do something harm, really harm to hack down some services or website? So just thinking about the powerfulness of AI because testing is kind of, breaking things down, right, to find a vulnerability. So how can you prevent that kind of abuse of AI in the automation testing world? That's just some of my thoughts and concerns. And thank you for this opportunity. I really enjoy it. Thank you. Bye.
Awesome. Thank you, Vicky, for calling in. And if you have a tip, tool, or technique you'd like to share with the guild, head on over to automationguild.com/show. On the right-hand side, leave a message. So Vicky brings up a good point, and it's something we covered in the previous episodes, that AI, the way it's pitched to us in the media, especially by people that aren't AI experts, it's always the end of the world type deal. But I think critical thinking skills are really far from being replaced anytime soon. So I understand, though, that with AI, there's other concerns that we need to be aware of. But that's our job as automation engineers, and that we're not as scared of the future. We're the ones that actually shape it. So it's up to us to make sure we educate folks in our organizations the power of AI and the things and risks to watch out for as we start implementing it. Like I said, it's not a done deal. We can only do what we agree to do. So if we all agree to have AI take care of everything, then that's an issue, because if we don't put proper mechanisms in place to have oversight into certain risks, and that's going to cause an issue. But thank you, Vicky, for that insight. So another thing I wanted to go over was news that I found around the web for this week. So let's check that out. All right, I'm still getting the transitions down, but I have a quick, 3 quick points I want to share with you on how I think automation really is going to change. 3 things I found in the news that really affected me, and how I think things going to be affects you as an automation engineer, basically. So let's just check out this. All right. Cool. All right, so 3 things automation related I found in the news this week that I think is important for us as automation engineers. The very first one is based on a survey. I don't know if you realize this, we're living in a golden age of test automation. So if you're a test automation engineer, if you're getting involved in test automation, if this is your career, I think it's a great time to be involved in automation. And the reason why is they did a survey, and based on this survey, about, I think, 30 billion is being allocated to testing and automation activities for software development. But they see this growing to over 130, 120 billion dollars by 2025. So what, that's 9 years. I'll be in my mid-50s. So hopefully if I'm still alive, I still have a job. So that's good. So if you're getting an automation, I like to say a lot of people get worried. Like we said with AI, we have concerns. Is AI going to replace us? I don't think so. And not only is it not going to replace us, I think it's going to offer us other opportunities as engineers to incorporate it and actually lead our organizations on how they should implement it to help us go forward. So the survey also mentioned that what's driving this is that you've been hearing probably a lot about digital transformation, right? How companies are going through digital transformations, all these buzzwords. But I really think it's true. Almost everyone I speak to, they're trying to incorporate continuous integration, continuous delivery within their software delivery pipeline. So a lot of them want to bake in things as early as possible in the software development lifecycle. So the further we can shift left and get automation baked into our products, the quicker and easier it is to actually ship our products at the end of it before it goes out to production. So there's certain tools that can help us. And I think there's going to be a rush. This is almost going to be a gold rush of different vendors, different people rushing into this space for different solutions. So not only is it a good time for automation engineers, but if you have an entrepreneurial bent, this is a good time for you to actually get in the game, get some skin in the game, create a tool, and see where it takes you. But of course, a lot of the issues that you've probably seen and I've seen also is hiring people that have these skills. So when I hire someone now for a testing position, not only do they need to be great testers, but they also need to have some sort of technical awareness. They need to understand code. They need to be technically aware enough to create some code, not necessarily be a hardcore developer, but to piece everything together like MacGyver and get things out the door to help the team create quicker software faster. Even if it's not a testing script, if there's something you could do to automate a process that's going to save someone on your team time, that is key. So when I think of automation, I don't think of testing necessarily. I think of end-to-end automation or anything to do with automation to help your team save time. So these skills, though, if you're watching this, you're probably one of the few that have the skills. So congratulations to us. And I think we need to start educating other people because it's going to be a bigger push for this. And if you're leading a team, you don't want to be the only person that knows how to do things because you'll never be able to have vacation time and you'll go crazy. So it's something I think we all need to be invested in. And I think it's a great time. So awesome for us for being automation engineers. And I think this is a great trend. I don't know if you agree with it or not, but if you don't, leave a comment. And let's see what people think in the guild about this particular survey or study, if they agree with it or not. I definitely see this as something that's taken off. So another news item that caught my eye after I saw this survey is this tool called Testum. And it's actually a company I started speaking to like a week or so ago. And this is like a buzzword, though. They use some sort of technology where you write your test, and I'm always skeptical of this, but I think as we get further along, that it's going to have to take off at some point. We'll have tools that are smart enough to scan our code and say, you made this change, or as you run your test over and over again, this particular tool learns over time and modifies itself automatically to go with those changes. So of course, there's probably going to be issues with that, but the reason why I brought this company up, is this is something that I think we're going to see more and more of, and something as automation engineers we need to be aware of and start learning to say, does this tool really does what it says it does? And if it does, how can it help my organization create automation quicker, faster, and has quality also? It's a funny thing, though, as I was at SauceCon this year, I saw Dave Heffner, and Dave Heffner is working on an awesome SaaS product. It's really cool. I'm not at liberty to say what it is, but it's a really cool product. And he was speaking to Adam Carmi, who is one of the co-founders of Appley Tools. And Adam said what Dave should do is just say, anytime he pitched it, throw in the term AI or machine learning, and he'll have capital venture people just throwing money at him for this. So it's kind of funny. So I don't know if a lot of these tools are just using these as buzzwords. They probably are, but it's up to us to really investigate them, see how legit they are, and help drive the innovation in this space. So here's one thing based on that survey that I found in the news that was really relevant to that survey. So that's the second thing. And the last thing I found is LoadRunner 12.55 has been released. So if you actually attended PerfGuild this year, right, we had Shlomi Nisim, who is I think he's the R&D lead for LoadRunner. Even today, even with all the awesome open source tools out there, performance tool solutions, which are great depending on your scenario, LoadRunner is still considered the standard for performance testing, especially if it's critical that you have exact information and that accuracy and, as professional as possible. LoadRunner is probably the tool for you. There are other tools that are also awesome that we went over in the Perf Guild that you should check out. So based on your situation, it depends what tool you use. But anyway, LoadRunner 12.55, it's still around. It's still, I think, the industry leader, and that's why I brought it up here. And if you read some of the things that they're starting to incorporate in here, it's just almost like how functional testing was like a few years ago, where it was open source versus vendor-based, and then all of a sudden, all these vendors started incorporating Selenium into their tool bases. Like you have LeanFT, SmartBear has a solution, you have Telerik that has a solution that integrates open source with their vendor-based tools that builds on top of the API for Selenium, but gives you the scaffolding for things that you normally would get out of a tool like, say, LoadRunner or Quick Test Professional. So you have a merging of the tools. So performance testing seems to be a little bit behind, but it seems like they're trying to catch up now. And if you look in LoadRunner, the latest thing, they're starting to allow you to run JMeter tests within LoadRunner. So it's probably a trend we're going to see more and more of. I don't think it's always going to be open source versus vendor-based. At some point, I think there's going to be a merging of the two. Open source is awesome, but it's open source, and these are people that are giving time without getting paid to contribute to something. And in my opinion, if you have the best of both worlds, you have an open source and you have a paid solution that helps innovate, and someone's being paid for it, you're most likely going to get changes in the product. But it all depends on the open source technology or whatever. But I think there's going to be a merging of the two, and this is something we'll probably be seeing more and more of within the performance testing space as well. Also, notice they have a Jenkins plugin. So as we talked about earlier in the show, how this digital transformation that's going on, how we want to incorporate functional automation into our pipelines for our builds. We're probably going to see more and more companies try to do the same with performance testing. So I think Greg agrees with this, and thank you, Greg, for that. So if you have a tip, tool, or technique that you'd like to share with the Guild, head on over to automationguild.com/show and click on the record button, leave a message, and I'll play it in a upcoming Automation Guild show. So that's the news around the web I wanted to share with you today. And the next item I'd like to go over is how being technically aware saved me $1,200. Right? So it doesn't necessarily apply to automation, but there's some things that I took away from automation that helped me with this thing. And I thought it would be an excellent case study on some key points of how I think, this type of thinking has helped save me money in my personal life as well. And what I mean by being technically aware. So I don't know if you've ever read the book by Lisa Crispin and Janet Gregory on agile testing, but one of the terms that come up in there is being technically aware. So a lot of questions people get asked as testers is, should I be a developer? How much coding do I need to know? Do I need to be a developer? And the answer is, you don't necessarily need to be a developer, but you do need to be technically aware enough to be able to read code, right? To modify some code. Not necessarily have to write an application, but be technically aware of to write enough code to get by to help your team. And I think that's very critical, especially as we go forward. But we probably might see a swing in the other way. If AI becomes the norm, we'll have more critical thinking involved. But still with that, you still need to be technically aware. So here's how it saved me $1,200 being technically aware. Now I'm going to tie it into automation. So stay with me here. So I got a quote recently. So I have a side business, and the side business is, my blog, my podcast, this show, my online conferences, and I'm in a mastermind, and everyone tells me, Joe, you have to stop doing everything. You need to start outsourcing it to different people. And I've never had luck with this. So I said, okay, I have this other job where I have a job where I have Automation Guild and I have Guild Conferences. And what I need to do is Guild Conferences is a new platform I created. I need to take all the users out of Automation Guild, put them into Guild Conferences. So now that all my conferences are going to be in one place. And when you log in, if you say have a conference that you paid for Perf Guild and Automation Guild 2017, and you log in, you would see all your conferences in one place. It wouldn't be all these different sites. So you have one username, one login, access to all your information in one location. All right, so that's the user case. So I need to export users out of a completely different set of technology website into Guild Conferences. So I asked someone, all right, how much will this cost me? And they quoted me $1,200. Now, I don't mind paying for something. I don't mind paying for someone's time. But this sounded a little excessive to me. So I said, all right, let me think about it. Let me see what I can do. I'm not a WooCommerce developer, designer at all, right? But I'm technically aware enough from automation to know that there's probably a solution out there I can use to help me. So I started looking and researching, and I noticed I could export users into a CSV file, right? But the problem with that is it's a different format because it's different technology. So I thought, all right, there are a few issues here. First is there's some requirements where I have Automation Guild users and I have Perf Guild users, and I didn't want it to have existing Automation Guild users being imported, overwriting users that are also Perf Guild users and Automation Guild users. So I don't know if that makes sense, but I didn't want to overwrite users that existed in both systems. So what I did is I said there has to be an easy way to do this. So I had two CSV files. I went to Stack Overflow and did a search for comparing two files, and I found some Python, right? Once again, I don't consider myself a developer, but I know enough to be able to read this and say, hey, I can modify this for my needs. All I need to do is pass it my CSV file for my Automation Guild users and my CSV file for my Perf Guild users, and then it'll print out a list of the users that are not in both, right? Because I didn't want to overwrite any user that was already in it. So I was able to find this. So it's being technically aware enough to know, like I said, I'm not a developer, know to look at some code and say, all right, I understand what it's doing. This is not going to win me any Google awards, right? I'm only cutting in and pasting, but that's good enough. Hey, that does the job. It helps me save time. That's what I'm going to do. So I tried that first, and I did a little subset. So my next hurdle was I now have the users that I need to import. So how do I import it? And I thought there's got to be a tool out there. So this is the same conversation people probably have with automation. A lot of people would probably go, hey, I'm going to write my own automation framework from scratch that does all this different stuff without even looking. Is there something that already exists that does this? Really, save yourself time and headaches and look first before you start building your own thing. So even though this was not specific to automation, it's the same concept. So I did a little research, and behold, there's a tool that does this. I didn't have to buy it. So I used this other tool that was able to read my CSV file and import it into my new Guild Conferences. So I'm almost there. I have one thing left. And that one thing is, not only do the users need to be imported and not overwrite any existing users, but also because I have these different conferences, different users have to be added to different conferences. So as of now, these users that are imported have no information about what conferences they should be added to. So I was thinking, I could use Selenium for this. I could go in, just do a loop through a number of users and click on each user and say, are you part of the Automation Guild? If so, go to the Automation Guild courses and add them to that and click on this button, right? Could do that. But you know what? Not only am I cheap, but I'm also lazy. And I didn't feel like going through this. And it also didn't feel very elegant. So I thought, there's got to be a tool for this, right? And there was. The only thing with this tool, and this is a conversation that comes up, should I pay for something or should I go open source? This tool, it was a plugin, I think it was like $100, a lot cheaper than $1,200, that allows it takes a CSV file, imports it, and assigns courses to them. So I installed this app and imported my users, and everything's working. Well, most things are working now. So even though this is not specific to automation, it's the same type of thinking and principles you should use for your automation. The first one is always look to see if there's something, code that already exists, a library that already exists, that you can import into your project to make use of without doing things from scratch. A great example of this is REST Assured. If you're doing REST API testing, why write blocks and blocks of code if you can import a library that does everything for you? So that's what this example shows, and also saved me $1,200. Why? Because I was technically aware enough to look at the requirements and say, is this person telling me true? And if it is there other ways I can work around it in a cost-effective way for my company, which is me? So you should always be looking out for your companies as well, even if it's not you directly. So that's a quick case study I wanted to show with you. Like I said, I think there are a lot of principles here that apply to test automation as well. So hopefully you get some value out of that. What's RPA? So I'm just looking in the comments and someone asked to explain about RPAs. So if you can give me some more info, I don't know what an RPA is, but if I know what it is, I'll try to explain it. All right, so it's time for the Greg Pascal Hour, or the Greg Pascal Automation in the Real World, 7 minutes of automation awesomeness, where Greg shares a tip, tool, a technique with us. So let's take a look at what Greg had to share with us today. And he has a great process that you'll see shortly on what he uses for manual testing and automation that I think is really cool. So check it out.
Hello, fellow automators. This is Greg Pascal with your weekly real-world test automation update. I got something cool to share with you this week. It really ties into something that most of us have encountered around what do we do when we're told to automate something and there's no manual test assets to work from. There's no manual test case at all. So my philosophy is good automation is really built upon good manual testing principles. It's just, a rule of thumb I have. I've seen both sides of this. I'm sure most of you have as well. And when I have a good manual test case, I tend to wind up with better test automation. When I have to do an interpretation of what I think the test case should do, then I tend to wind up having a lot of rework and things like that. So I've got something cool I want to introduce you to today. Anyway, we know we've all been there. We're automating before the manual test case is created. It's just the reality being an automation person. This stuff comes up. Usually here's some of the things that we have. There's no manual test case to refer to when the automation fails. So, someone comes to you and says, hey, this test case isn't working, but you have no reference to go back to. So you likely go back to it and take your best stab at it, trying to figure out, well, I guess it was supposed to click this button, or maybe enter this kind of data, or that sort of thing. It even gets harder when validations come into play. That's at least been my experience. This is one of those gotchas out there for automation engineers where we do a lot of automating. It's clicking a lot of screens and buttons and actions happening on the screen, and yet we're not doing a lot of validating. So most of the time we take our best guess at what the test case should be and we develop it. And we're typically missing that subject matter expert, the SME as we often call them, who owns the test strategy going forward, and we wind up becoming that person. That's kind of trouble on the horizon when you see that coming up. So build great test automation. In order to do that, build it upon a great manual test strategy. So why do we test at all? Let's really get back to this fundamental of why in the world are we doing it. So we know it's around reducing risk. An important one that gets forgotten a lot is we're protecting the company brand. So the company I work for, I want to make sure the products that go out represent our culture, brand, and the things that we stand for well. And one of the other ones that's really important is that we're an advocate for the customer. So we're trying to put ourselves in their shoes and think about what they want to get out of the application. Today I want to introduce you to a great manual test strategy, and it's called METS, M-E-T-S, and that stands for Minimal Essential Testing Strategy. The great thing is I have a website called metstesting.com, and what I'm about to share with you is all documented on that website, and everything's free. How cool is that? Most automation folks like free. METS was created, I would say, gosh, it's about 17 years ago now. And I worked for a late night copy company most of you have probably used at some point, maybe back in college, called Kinko's. And I was in that first role as a manual engineer. And I had this reality show up of things that needed to get fixed in a very short amount of time. And as a new official QA engineer, sometimes I was given a short amount of time, and I would think, wow, well, next time, I get a short deadline like that, I want to make sure I at least check, these couple things. And through that process, I created a checklist literally on my desk, something I scribbled down on every day. Remember to check the page loads completely, and our logo is in place, and that I can put an item in the shopping cart, and those sort of things that are fairly obvious. But when you're under a time crunch, those can be the things that often get forgotten. So once I created this checklist sort of approach, it was in place for a while, and my QA manager said, "Hey, Greg, that looks like a pretty interesting idea. What do you think about sharing that at a conference?" And that's how I initially got speaking at the STAR conferences, was through teaching METS, and it's something I actually just taught recently. So even though it's been well over 15, 16 years now, I'm continuing to teach folks this principle. So METS really enables a manual tester to easily document test cases. That's the whole idea. Think of an Excel spreadsheet, and in there we have columns from critical, high, medium, and low. And in there, I just put a brief explanation of the critical test I want to perform in that cell under the critical column. And through that, I've got other basically cells within that spreadsheet or in that tool that I can drop types of tests into it. So one of the fundamental things about METS is that all tests can be prioritized from critical, high, medium, and low. You put obviously the critical things are the things that are the most important to test every time. Those are the things that are probably going to be part of your regression suite, down to high and the medium and low. Low things, obviously, things that if you had some extra time, it wouldn't be bad to check that your About Us page works, or those sort of things. So with the test cases organized now in METS in this prioritization sort of format from critical, high, medium, low, you now have an awesome manual test strategy. We base our exploratory testing approach solely off the METS grid. So when we get a new release, our manual engineer will use that to prompt them on what they should test, so they don't forget the important things. And what's really cool about this, as you and I as automation folks, is guess what become the candidates for the automation for us? The critical things, the items in the critical column. This is probably, at least as an automation guy, one of the few ways I've seen how we identify what we should automate and what we shouldn't. I'm not a big fan of automating the whole regression suite unless you just got endless amounts of cash and money and time and talent laying around. So this gives you an approach that's reasonable, that you can perform in a fairly reasonable amount of time and maintain, and you have something to go back to when the test case fails. So it's never too late to build a manual test strategy, a great one. And METS is a great place to consider looking if you don't have a piece like that in place, a tool like that in place. And believe it or not, METS actually complements an existing manual test strategy real well, because, like I said, it can lead in your exploratory testing approaches as well. So that's my tip for the week. Again, check out METS Testing, METS testing.com, and you'll find all kinds of resources there. I even have, I believe, a video of me teaching it at a meetup here in our area, and all the spreadsheets and everything are free to download. So I hope you use this tip and have a great rest of your week.
Awesome. Thank you, Greg, for your automation awesomeness and for that tip. Definitely check out METS at the URL. I'll have that in the show notes as well at automationguild.com/show. So we're running out of time, but we have a lot of questions here I just want to address really quickly, and maybe in another show. I'll address them in more detail. So I'm gonna get in trouble here, but someone's prompted me in the comments, so I'm just gonna say, I think UI automation is for suckers. I really do. And what I mean by that is if your only automation is UI automation, you're in trouble. I don't care what tool you're using. Most likely, you're going to get in trouble over time using just UI automation. So the reason why I brought that up is someone's asking, does API testing completely replace UI testing, or does UI testing become obsolete? I would love that to be the case, but I don't think that it's that extreme. What I tell my team is if you have functionality, test it where the business logic is located. So if you have an API that's where the business logic is located and it's serving up information for a UI that's based on that information, test it at the API level. Or if it could be done at a unit level, do it at the unit level test. If it can't be done at the unit level, do it at a REST API or integration type level. Then, only then, if it can't be done at a unit or API, then only look to the UI and only do that rarely. Or if you had like 99 test cases, maybe have one that's doing the UI and the 98 other ones under the covers doing the API if you have an API available to you. I definitely agree with that approach. Also, there's certain tools like Apply Tools, which does visual validation testing, where a lot of times people are doing functional automation, but they're using functional automation to do visual validation, and you always have false positives, so you end up wasting a lot of time. So there's other technologies out there that I think are better suited for that, things like Apply Tools. So that's my quick take. I don't think UI testing will be completely obsolete. There's always going to be a place for it, of course. But I would think over time, especially as we go towards microservices, that more and more testing resources are probably going to be at the API level. And also developers should be involved. They should be doing more unit type testing. And anything under the covers I think is better, is I guess the main point. And I know we're ran out of time. It's now it's past 12:30. I like to keep this at a half hour. If you like the show, give it a thumbs up. Someone gave it a thumbs down. Who does that? This is a free show, Anyway, give it a thumbs up if you like it. Subscribe to the show. Hit me up at automationguild.com/show. Let me know what you think by leaving a comment. You can record it, and I'll play it back in a future episode. And that's it for this episode of the Automation Guild Show. As always, test everything and keep the good. See you next time. Cheers.